My name is Evelyn, and the moment my husband, Henry, passed away suddenly, my world turned upside down. I was left alone in our small, aging house, nestled in a quiet neighborhood of rural Ohio, with just my little boy, Mason, depending on me. The creaky floors and faded wallpaper seemed to hold the echoes of our past happiness, now replaced by the heavy silence of loss. Every morning, before the sun even rose, I was already awake. I prepared breakfast for Mason, gently waking him with a soft voice, masking the ache in my heart. Though exhaustion weighed down my body, I never let Mason see my tears or my fears. I knew that he needed my strength now more than ever. I promised myself I would be his anchor, his shield against a world that suddenly felt too vast and uncertain. The nights were the hardest. When Mason finally drifted to sleep, I would sit by his bedside, watching his innocent face bathed in moonlight. The house would be quiet except for the faint sounds of my restless heart. In those still moments, I silently vowed to give Mason a better future, one filled with hope, education, and opportunities I never had. Those hours were spent whispering promises to him and to myself, a mother's quiet pledge that no matter how difficult, I would never give up. Years passed, and Mason grew stronger, not just in body, but in character. I poured every ounce of my energy into raising him right, working double shifts, helping with schoolwork, teaching him the values of kindness and responsibility. It was exhausting, but I never saw it as a burden. Every small achievement of his felt like a victory for both of us. When he graduated high school with honors, my heart swelled with pride and relief. That day, I saw not just my son, but a young man ready to face the world. Life slowly found its rhythm again, but the quiet moments still gnawed at me. The house often felt too empty, and I longed for someone to share my days and evenings with, a friend, a companion, someone to fill the silence that sometimes felt overwhelming. I dreamed of laughter that wasn't just Mason's, of a fuller home. Then came the day Mason introduced me to Ava, a warm, spirited woman whose smile lit up every room she entered. From that moment, the house began to change. It was no longer just Mason and me. Ava brought a new energy, a lightness that had been missing for so long. The walls that once held only memories of loss now echoed with laughter, shared meals, and dreams of the future. On Mason and Ava's wedding day, standing quietly in the back, tears streamed down my face. Tears of gratitude, hope, and joy. This family, rebuilt from heartbreak and resilience, felt whole again. The emptiness I once carried was replaced by the warmth of love and new beginnings. Looking back, I realize how far we've come. Through every sleepless night and every sacrifice, I held on to the belief that better days were ahead. Now, surrounded by family and love, I feel the promise of those days unfolding before me. Our old house has transformed from a place of sorrow into a sanctuary of hope and happiness. Hey everyone, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment below and let me know where you're from. Sharing your thoughts is totally free and means the world to me. When you like, share, comment, and subscribe, you're not just supporting this channel, you're helping it grow and reach more amazing people like you. By engaging, you help create a community where we can all connect, inspire each other, and keep bringing you more great content. So don't be shy, hit that like button, share with your friends, leave your comment, and subscribe for more. It's easy, free, and it truly makes a difference. Thank you so much for being here and for your support. It means everything. When my son, Mason, and his wife Ava first moved into my little house, I thought it would be the beginning of a new chapter filled with warmth and companionship. For months, the house buzzed with quiet laughter, shared meals, and the comforting feeling of family under one roof. I told myself that this was how life was meant to be, a mother and son growing closer, with a daughter-in-law who would become like a daughter to me. At first, everything seemed peaceful. Mason would still find time to sit with me in the evenings, sharing stories about his day, asking about mine. Ava was polite, even warm on occasion, and I tried hard to see the good in her. I believed that the bumps we hit along the way were just part of adjusting to living together. But slowly, the harmony began to unravel. Mason's attention seemed to drift more toward Ava and her busy schedule, leaving less and less time for me. Our conversations became shorter, sometimes strained, and I caught myself waiting, hoping he would ask how I was or if I needed anything. Moments that grew increasingly rare. The cozy little family I had hoped for started to feel distant, almost like I was a visitor in my own home. Ava's attitude grew colder too. Small comments here and there, sighs when I entered the room, the way she would close doors a little too firmly, they all chipped away at my peace of mind. It was subtle at first, easy to dismiss, but over time it weighed on me like a stone in my chest. I felt the walls closing in, and the house, once full of love and laughter, now echoed with silent tension. Then came the day Mason suggested I move into the smaller guest room so Ava could convert the larger bedroom into her home office. He said it was just temporary, that it would be better for everyone. But when I packed my things and moved my few belongings into that tiny room, I felt the sharp sting of rejection. It was as if my place in this house, my home, was being diminished, slowly erased. That night, lying on the thin mattress in the cramped room, I stared at the ceiling and felt a profound loneliness settle over me. The life I had fought so hard to build, the family I had dreamed of, seemed to be slipping through my fingers. The warmth I once felt was replaced by a cold, unfamiliar distance. It was hard not to wonder if I had become invisible, a burden rather than a beloved mother. I tried to hold on to hope, to believe that things would get better, that Mason and Ava's love for me hadn't truly faded. But every day the quiet grew louder. The small gestures of neglect, the cold looks, the subtle exclusions, they painted a picture I could no longer ignore. The house felt different now. I was surrounded by family, yet I felt more alone than ever. The joy of their arrival had dissolved into a heavy silence, and as I sat by the window, watching the world move on outside, I realized that sometimes, even in your own home, you can feel like a stranger. It was well past midnight when I suddenly woke up. The house was silent, or so I thought, until faint voices drifted from the living room, Mason and Ava. I wasn't supposed to be awake, but something in their tone pulled me from my restless sleep. I crept out of my small room, careful not to wake anyone, and stood by the doorway, listening. Their voices were low, hurried, but unmistakably clear. Mason said, "Mom's retirement savings, if we can get that, we could finally afford the new truck I've been wanting. It's going to make my work so much easier." Ava's voice chimed in, cold and matter-of-fact. "Yeah, and with her staying home and handling the house, we can save money on the cleaning service. It's a win-win." I felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath me. My heart pounded painfully as the words settled in. My own son and daughter-in-law discussing how to take my hard-earned retirement money to buy a truck, and expecting me to become their full-time housekeeper to save money. It wasn't just a financial request. It felt like a betrayal deep in my soul. I remember standing there, paralyzed, the dim light from the hallway casting long shadows on the floor. The quiet tick of the clock felt deafening. I could hardly breathe. The love and respect I had once believed defined our family now felt like a distant memory, replaced by selfishness and greed. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I replayed that conversation over and over in my mind, struggling to make sense of it. How could Mason, my son, who I raised with so much care and sacrifice, think so little of me? How could Ava, the woman I had tried so hard to accept and welcome, be so cold and calculating? Hey everyone, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment below and let me know where you're from. Sharing your thoughts is totally free and means the world to me. When you like, share, comment, and subscribe, you're not just supporting this channel, you're helping it grow and reach more amazing people like you. At first I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding, a cruel joke, but the coldness in their eyes, the subtle shifts in their behavior afterward, told me otherwise. I was no longer a mother or a respected elder in this house. I was a resource to be exploited. For the first time in years, tears came freely. But amidst the pain, a fierce resolve began to grow inside me. I realized that staying silent was no longer an option. If I continued to ignore what was happening, I would lose everything: my dignity, my independence, and perhaps even my son's love. One quiet afternoon, I sat down at the old kitchen table, the same table where Mason had learned to eat with a spoon, and where we had shared countless family dinners. I opened a notebook and began to write plans, ideas, ways to regain control over my life. I researched legal advice about protecting my retirement funds and looked into local community groups for support. Slowly, I began to rebuild my strength. I started saying no when asked to do extra chores, explaining that my body was not as young as it once was. I found small ways to assert myself, to remind Mason and Ava that I was not invisible or expendable. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, cold shoulders, and moments when I questioned if I could hold on. But I knew I had to keep going. For myself, and for the example I wanted to set for Mason, even if it was late. One evening, I confronted them gently but firmly. "I'm not your bank account, and I'm not your maid," I said, my voice steady despite the tears welling up. "I deserve respect, and I will protect my independence." There was silence at first, then Mason looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Ava's expression hardened, but something shifted in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement that things couldn't stay the same. That night, as I lay in my bed, I felt a fragile sense of peace. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life and my place in this family. I understood now that silence only feeds neglect and abuse, but courage can open doors, even if they lead to difficult conversations and changes. My story isn't one of instant resolution or fairy tale endings. It's a story of a woman who faced betrayal within her own home and chose to stand up, to fight for her dignity and freedom. I may still have a long road ahead, but I am no longer afraid to walk it. The air in the living room was thick with tension the moment I decided to confront Mason and Ava. I could no longer bear the silent erosion of respect and the blatant selfishness that had crept into our home. After overhearing their conversation about my retirement savings, something inside me snapped. That night, I gathered every ounce of courage and called them both to sit down with me. At first, Mason and Ava exchanged uncomfortable glances, their faces tight with irritation. Mason started defensively. "Mom, you have to understand, this is about the family. We need that money to move forward. It's not just for us, but for you too." Ava nodded quickly, adding, "Yeah, it's for your benefit as well. We just want what's best for everyone." Their words felt like knives twisting in my chest. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking. "Mason, Ava, this is my money. I earned it through decades of hard work and sacrifice. No one has the right to demand it from me, especially not by hiding behind family needs or pretending it's for my benefit." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily between us. Mason's jaw tightened, and Ava's eyes flashed with frustration. But I wasn't finished. "I've tried to be patient, to accept your presence in my home, but the disrespect, the expectation that I would simply hand over my life's savings and become your servant, it stops here," I said firmly. "If you cannot live here with respect and kindness, then you have no place in this house." Their shock was palpable. For a moment, neither of them spoke, perhaps realizing that this was not a battle they could easily win. Mason's voice cracked as he pleaded, "Mom, please. We're family, we just want to." But I shook my head. Helping doesn't mean taking what isn't freely given. It doesn't mean treating me like I'm invisible or a burden. Ava's expression darkened, but I stood my ground, unwavering. "I've made a decision. If you can't respect me, you'll have to leave." The room's atmosphere shifted. In the days that followed, I sat down with my lawyer and began the process of revising my will. Mason and Ava would no longer be beneficiaries. Though the house was quiet and my heart heavy, I felt a fierce sense of liberation. My stand was, in the end, my actions shook Mason and Ava. The reality of losing their inheritance made them realize that the path they had chosen was a dangerous one. It was a painful lesson, but one that I hoped would bring them to understand the true meaning of family, respect, trust, and love. After Mason and Ava left the house, the world outside quickly showed them how harsh reality could be. No longer sheltered by the walls that once echoed with family memories, they faced the cold, unforgiving truth of independence, but not the kind they had imagined. Their plan to take my retirement savings had been shattered before it even began. Unbeknownst to them, I had moved every penny into a separate account, securely documented and inaccessible to anyone but me. At first, the frustration and disbelief consumed them. They called, they begged, and they tried every excuse to convince me to relent. But I remained firm. This money was the fruit of my lifelong labor, not a prize to be claimed by entitlement or manipulation. As the weeks passed, Mason and Ava's situation grew more desperate. Without financial support and without the roof of the family home, they struggled to keep their lives afloat. The pride that had once fueled their demands was replaced by a gnawing regret, but the damage was already done. What hurt me most wasn't just the financial betrayal, it was the fractures in the bonds of family. Word of their behavior spread quickly among relatives. What had started as whispered concerns soon turned into open disappointment. Mason and Ava became known not for their successes or kindness, but for their greed and disrespect. Visits from extended family became fewer and eventually stopped altogether. Invitations to gatherings ceased. They were isolated, branded as ungrateful and selfish, labels they had brought on themselves. One cold evening, Mason sat alone in a cramped apartment, staring at a faded photograph of his mother and me, a stark reminder of what he had lost. The realization settled heavily. In his quest to control money and power, he had pushed away the one person who had loved him unconditionally. He tried to call me several times, each attempt ending in unanswered calls or my firm refuse. Though my heart ached for the son I once knew, I knew that forgiveness didn't mean tolerating disrespect or betrayal. My strength was not in silence, but in standing firm for what was right. In the quiet of my home, I found solace in my independence and the certainty that I had defended my rightful place and peace. Mason's loneliness became a cautionary tale, a reminder that love must be nurtured. I hoped deep down that someday Mason would understand that true wealth is not measured by money, but by the bonds of family and honor, and that once broken, those bonds are not easily mended. After everything that had happened, the heartbreak, the confrontation, and the empty house left behind by Mason and Ava, I found myself at a crossroads. For a long time, I had been consumed by pain and anger, but slowly, I realized that healing wasn't just about holding on to the past. It was about rediscovering myself. I started small. Mornings began with quiet stretches and gentle walks around the neighborhood. The creaky joints that had carried me through decades needed care, and I was determined to give myself the kindness I deserved. I took time to tend to the garden out back, nurturing plants that blossomed with vibrant colors, reminding me that growth was still possible even after harsh winters. Inside the house, I set new routines, cooking meals that I enjoyed, listening to music that stirred memories but also brought peace, and reading books that sparked curiosity and calm. The quiet moments were no longer lonely. They were filled with self-discovery and gentle joy. Neighbors began to notice the change. Mrs. Carter from next door stopped by one afternoon with freshly baked cookies and a warm smile. We shared stories over tea, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't for years. Old friends, too, reached out, their voices like lifelines reconnecting me to the world I had briefly lost faith in. With this newfound strength, I revisited the task I had postponed for far too long, revising my will. I made it crystal clear. My assets would only go to those who truly valued and loved me for who I am, not for what I could provide. It was a declaration of self-respect and protection, a final safeguard against the kind of betrayal I had endured. Though my life had simplified, it was far from empty. I was no longer weighed down by worry over people who wished to exploit me. The house felt like a sanctuary again, not because of who lived in it, but because of the peace I carried within myself. Still, I held on to a hope, fragile but persistent, that Mason would one day see the truth, that he would understand the meaning of family beyond money and control. I wished for his heart to soften, for regret to lead to reconciliation, but only if it came with genuine respect and love. As the days turned into months, I walked forward on my own path with quiet dignity. The battles I had fought, the courage I summoned, and the boundaries I set were all part of my legacy. Not just the money or the house, but the strength of a woman who refused to lose herself. I was victorious, not because I won a material battle, but because I reclaimed my identity, my pride, and my peace. That was a triumph no one could take away,